Today's going to be Unit 4, Day 4. Some reminders before we get started. Make sure that you're taking notes as you go through the video, and make sure you complete the vocabulary in whatever way you see fit on this one. So let's go ahead and get started. So our terms for today are going to be Roaring Twenties, League of Nations, Fascism, Mussolini, British Commonwealth, the March on Rome, Kellogg-Briand Pact, and the Treaty of Westminster. Our concepts for today are going to be America post-World War I, the rise of fascism, and Eastern Europe post World War One. So after World War II, and a lot of the world becomes this era of the known as the Roaring Twenties. This is a period of somewhat stable peace, with reduced tensions in Europe and most of the world. There's still going to be a lot of revolutions taking place, but look, it's kind of calming down. Um, this is also going to be the birth of very extremist movements on both the left and right, with extreme nationalism, fascism on one end, and extreme socialist communism on the other end. But this is also a period of economic boom, um, growing on the back of consumer demand. This is an age of technological marvels, radio, airplanes, easier access to cars and automobiles. This is going to be the time period of the transatlantic plane rides. This is kind of really interconnectivity. We're also going to have a lot of cultural phenomenons take place in the 20s, new art styles, Dadaism, Surrealism, Bauhaus, Cubism. We're also going to have a lot of new literature that's going to deal with realism, often pessimistic, for the rich. This is going to be F. Scott Fitzgerald, Great Gatsby, certain others. We're also going to have important scientific discoveries, right? It's just a period of this technological growth and economic growth, well, until the end. But at the beginning of it, women gain gain the right to vote in the United States and Europe, which is a big step forward, and for a lot of kind of movements and prohibition, and a lot of things are going to happen in the 20s, right? Right. We also have the birth of flappers, right? These are going to be semi-independent women who kind of strike out on their own in the 20s, especially after the right to vote. It's an extremely important movement for women's rights. Now, as we talked about at the end of World War I with Wilson's 14 points, we have the birth of the League of Nations. Now, the League of Nations was created to maintain world peace. That was its goal on paper. It's largely dominated by the UK and France. And the League was also used to isolate Germany, right, which is going to cause a lot of resentment toward Germany and from Germany, right? So the League also had no power to enforce its decisions. So if the League went, hey, you can't do that, bad. Okay, they got a letter that said they couldn't do that. They couldn't do anything, right? So it wasn't an effective force. Now, they are very idealistic, meaning that they really want a lot of, goals and things. They try to outlaw war with the Kellogg-Briand Treaty, right? They try. It doesn't work. They try to disarm nations. They try to reduce navies. Doesn't work, right? But many nations do reduce their militaries to minimal levels, at least until the 30s. Right, so the League of Nations, kind of all the ones in green or light green, kind of are late joiners, or joins or late joiners. There is a very, very important member that isn't on here, and that's going to be the United States. They do not join the League of Nations. So this big powerhouse of economic and military advantage doesn't even join the thing that their own presidents tried to create. So due to all of this, right, due to all of this kind of isolation and war, right, and resentment from World War I, we get a new ideology known as fascism. This is extreme nationalism, extreme nationalism, right? It had its goal to seize power forcefully, right? This really kind of starts with the Italians, right, in the 1920s, right? The March on Rome is kind of their first big movement, right? This is going to be under Benito Mussolini, right? He's going to advocate for a nationalist corporate state. He wanted to end both socialism and capitalism, right? And due to all of this political upheaval and all of this movement and protest, the king actually gave in and named Mussolini the prime minister. Right, Mussolini immediately began to reform the Italian state. Any opposition was removed by his secret police, known as the Black Shirts, and it kind of really kind of move and kind of push toward this kind of authoritarian regime. Right, they go from like a monarchy with some like government to like one guy in charge with fascism, and it's like it's this big movement. Right? Now, after the Treaty of Versailles, we have a bunch of new nations that are kind of popped up at the end of the war, especially in Eastern Europe. Now, a lot of these nations, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Yugoslavia, all these nations do try to emulate Western Europe, but it's hard because they don't have the wealth or stability because they're a brand new country. Now, at first, they were extremely hostile toward communists in the Soviet Union, right? Due to the authoritarian and kind of scared because they were all very influenced by Western Europe because they want to be Western Europe. But it's also hard to be a new country, right? And we have this authoritarian temptation, right? I want to ask you guys a question. What's easier, having everybody vote on decisions in Republican style government or having one guy in charge that does everything that's supposed to do? Right? Which one's easier to run a country, especially when you're a new baby country? Right? That's the kind of thing you want to think about. And by the end of right before World War II, only Czechoslovakia is going to remain a democracy. Right? Everybody else is going to fall back to monarchical regimes, or they're going to be authoritarian dictatorships. Right? It's extremely hard to run a new country. Right? So everything here in yellow is going to be an authoritative state, right? Where this is a king, queen, or a dictator. And we have you kind of can already start to see kind of the sides of World War II besides Russia. Right, now let's talk about the British, right? We know we've talked about white dominions before. White-dominated colonies are granted self-government. Right, they really share their foreign policy, defense, and trade stuff with Britain. So whatever Britain's doing, they're doing. Now we do have the rise of kind of revolts in 1916 during World War I. Ireland's like, look, we're done. We don't want to deal with the British no more. And the British are like, cool, right? Like, we're in the middle of a war. You pick like the worst time to do this, but sure. And they kind of separate Ireland into North and South. We have Northern Ireland, which is predominantly Protestant, and they want to remain with the UK. Southern Ireland was to be called the Irish Free State, became a self-governing dominion. But Ireland, the Irish army was not like super stoked with that, and they were like, no. The IRA, the Irish Republican Army, basically turned into terrorism to kind of kick the British out of Northern Ireland, right? Now, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they were granted Dominion status after World War I for their help in the war. They basically were given self-government and like, hey, like you can run your own government, but you're still like under the crown. So it's like, sure. Canada has rapid industrial growth, rapid large-scale immigration, increasingly friendly with the United States. 1931 rolls around and we get the Treaty of Westminster. And what this does is this Britain and its dominions, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, form a permanent political alliance. Right? Permanent. You can no leave. And that still exists today. And this creates the British Commonwealth. Right? Now it does change a little bit, but those still very like echoes still exist. Right? Now let's talk about the rise of the United States. After World War I, they're put in a role of leadership. They become extremely industrialized due to wartime economies. They become the largest center of banking. By the end of the war, they have the second largest navy and the largest military. Right? They're the big kids on campus now. Right? Now, the Treaty of Versailles gets rejected by the United States Senate. right? They refuse to join the League of Nations, and due to this, they retreat into what is known as isolationism, right? Where they're not dealing with nobody but themselves. Well, themselves in Latin America, of course, right? Because we got to deal with that. Right? Now, this also leads to the first Red Scare due to the communists in Russia, right? And the kind of communist revolutions and the U.S. backing of the czarists, right? So the United States government started to see communists everywhere. Like, are you commie? Are you a commie? Are you a communist? Communist, 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 right? So it's one of those where the United States becomes increasingly paranoid and scared about communism, which we're going to see again during the Cold War after World War II. But this is the first Red Scare. This is the United States being paranoid and searching for communism under basically where none exist. So that's where we're going to end for today. So guys, make sure you're taking notes, make sure you do vocabulary, and I'll see you guys in class. All right, bye.